Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Product Pivot. My name is Santi and I have my awesome co-host Megan with me. And today we are very excited to have Brendan on with us. And before I flip it over to him for an introduction, I'll give a little recap about what this podcast is all about. We share real stories from folks in the product and tech space, their journeys into product, the things that they've done in their career, insights, learnings, lessons, all that fun stuff. So as I mentioned, we're very excited to have Brendan with us, and I'm going to flip it over to him so he can give an introduction about himself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Brendan. I'm currently the product lead at Campfire, which is an AI native ERP accounting software. So that's what I've been doing. I've joined in December last year. So been here for a little while now, and that's sort of my main focus. And I can get into my past if you like, but that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Well, if you want to get into your past, let's do it. Tell us how you landed in product and tell us a little bit about your past.
Of course. So you might be able to tell from my accent that I don't come from the US. So I grew up in Australia, in Western Australia, went to school, then went to university, studied accounting, then graduated. My background is accounting, so you'll quickly sort of figure that out. Graduated, went to an accounting firm called KPMG. So that's part of like the big four. They're international. You sort of find them in any major city all over the world. So did that, went into audit. So that's where you're really just getting into auditing companies' financial statements. So think of Meta, Alphabet, Nvidia. They all get audited 4 times a year on their profit, their cash balance, all of those things. So that's what I was doing. I was doing like large mining companies and things. That's sort of Australia's very resource driven. So I did that. And then I got my chartered accountancy as well. So you sort of work full time, study part time. That takes 3 years. So in total, stayed about 6 years of accounting, and then continued my career at KPMG. Ended up working in the States for a while in New York, San Francisco. Ended up in technical accounting back in KPMG. This time in the Sydney office. So that was sort of really interesting experience dealing with some very intelligent people that know a lot about accounting, sort of a little bit like dealing with an LLM, but I still think they probably know a little more than the LLMs. And then I sort of left KPMG and started my sort of product journey, where in this case, I joined an accounting software company, but I was the subject matter expert. So I essentially didn't have to deal with sort of things like sprints and everything. I could just sort of sit in the corner and really think about the detailed functionality of what the accounting software needs to do based on my background, which is heavily accounting focused. So really enjoyed that. That was my first taste with working with engineers, learning sort of how software is built, how product works, working with designers, all of that fun stuff. And did that for a number of years and then decided, okay, sort of have an idea how all this works. I'm now going to start my own company, and founded a company that was very specifically targeted to a certain type of accounting, lease accounting, brought that to market, ended up having hundreds of customers all over the world, and ended up exiting that last year, and then took a couple of months off and then joined Campfire. And here we are sitting today.
I love that. I feel like the thread here is very much accounting. So you're a guy who loves numbers, it sounds like.
I wouldn't say that. I think accounting is sort of logic. I think it's a bit of a misconception, say that accountants are good at math. I would actually push back on that and say, no, no, no. Like no accountant ever studied like mathematics at university. We do very basic math, but I'd say accounting's more logic, and it's a bit like a language. And I think working with engineers, it's definitely something, it can be a challenge for engineers to sort of like bridge the gap between this accounting logic, and which sometimes doesn't make any sense. It's just made up rules at the end of the day, like they're pretty arbitrary. But yeah, I would say definitely though, the strong thread is 100% accounting. And I think that sort of helps me a lot in this product role for sure.
And you said Campfire is also an accounting company, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly. So
cool.
I think building product with my background makes it a lot easier because it helps you sort of sift through, say, customer feedback. You sometimes need to go to these accounting standards that will be very prescriptive of how the functionality needs to work and the outputs need to work. So I think it is very helpful for my role at Campfire.
That's really cool, Santi, because I feel like one of the themes that we've seen in hiring in 2026 and even late 2025 has been domain expertise. And
Yes.
so I think that's really interesting to hear that that's like a thing about Campfire, and his background is entirely in accounting. So I think that's really cool. Can you talk a little bit about how you got that role at Campfire, just for those who are listening?
Yeah, so I think like majority of my time really working in product was when I started my own company because we were a very, very small company for a number of years. It was just myself and an engineer working. So that was like basically for all I was doing was product. So really designing the software, we took a different approach where we were going to be like off the shelf software, which in the enterprise space an enterprise accounting space doesn't really ever happen. It's more of sales led growth. We're going to do product led growth. So, because of that, there was a huge focus on the product, making it as easy to use, accessible, and just removing all friction to getting to the product. And that's sort of, they were very entrenched incumbents. So, that's how we sort of differentiated ourselves and managed to get customers. And it actually worked pretty well. So, I think that was the key catalyst to, I think doing that was quite a challenge, and did it with an incredibly small team. So I learned a lot there, a lot of the challenges that Campfire faces in terms of a technical accounting product perspective. I sort of went through already and sort of have sort of crossed those bridges before. So I think that put me in very good stead now for my role at Campfire. And the way I ended up at Campfire, always interested in YC companies. I was just sort of trawling through YC companies on the YC website and saw this is a problem I'm very interested in. I've spent a lot of time now working on accounting to begin with and accounting software. So saw what Campfire was doing, was very interested in it, and then yeah, just applied, and that's how I ended up in this role.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Sandy, do you have any comments? I feel like I love the theme. I love the theme and domain expertise because everyone I talk to, it's a job seeker now. It's like domain expertise is so key right now. And I think that's so awesome to hear that thread.
Yeah, I think it's great. Actually, one of my coworkers did the exact same thing. She's a private investigator. She's worked in security, threat intelligence space for a long time. And so we were hiring for two product managers at the time. So I was contacted and she was contacted. And so I had different expertise in product management and she had domain expertise. And so we came on and we benefited hugely from having her join, just being able to tap into it's like an in-house customer, right? In a way, like it's that you have that person that's you're in that role that you're constantly looking to get feedback from. So I think it's really cool. And another thing that we've been hearing on this podcast, it's becoming more of a theme now, is people building their own thing and using that to really drive that product experience from nothing, right? A lot of these folks have not had a product role or didn't have a product role at the time. So they're like, well, I'm going to kind of just make one for myself. And they build something or they work on something that gives them that hands-on experience. And it's beautiful because it gives you literally that, the hands-on experience. We've seen it, even Megan and I, we've been in product for years, but even building our, own product portfolio, we got more skills and new developments and learnings that we otherwise wouldn't have had we not have started building something on our own. So I think that was just a really cool thing you touched on that I am hearing from guests more and more as we bring folks on and chat with them.
I'm curious how that ties into Campfire's focus on customer conversations, because being the sole product person, founder, alongside an engineer, you had to take that on at your company. And so I imagine that you brought that to Campfire when you became the product lead. So can you talk a little bit about how you have that core focus of customer conversations and how you stay focused on it being the product lead?
Yeah, for sure. I think customer conversation is always interesting because sometimes they have incredible feedback that you most definitely need to listen to, and sometimes maybe their feedback is a little more specific to their use case and may not be applicable to everybody else. So I think that's sort of again where my background can be very useful because you can go like, wow, that's actually, whoops, I missed that. That's critical. We need to bring that into the product. We need to make that change. We need to have that functionality. It should be providing that output. While other times it might be their workflow or some feature that they want that's necessarily not applicable to anyone else. And then you can sort of have the ability to push back and say, hey, I hear you on that, but right now that's something we can't focus on just due to this is something more unique to you. And we're not building bespoke software just for you. So I think customer conversations are super important, and it's really important to listen to customers, but you could just end up in a rabbit hole and not really know where you should be going. So I think having an accounting background and then also in a way having the accounting standards, because at the end of the day, it needs to produce the outputs, which are the financial statements like a balance sheet, an income statement, a cash flow statement. And the accounting standards are incredibly prescriptive on how they should work and what they should look like and all of those things. So that can help as well, because you can just be like, let's just look at what the accounting standards say and we're just going to go with that. The, the complexity arises is companies like to not follow the accounting standards as well. So then you're like, okay, now we have to sort of build functionality to cater for both. So it is hard. And yeah, those customer conversations can sometimes be interesting. But of course, I would never say do not speak to your customers. I think it's integral to get their feedback and their thoughts and finding out what works well and what's not. But yeah, I say in the accounting space and accounting software space, there can be a little more nuance to it as well.
Can you share how many you try to have a week, a day, a month? I mean, I don't know what your flow is like because we've had like a mix when we talk to different product people to the point where we've talked to some that haven't talked to any in months. And so I'm curious, like, what are your standards for customer conversations?
Yeah, I think it would depend on what we're building and the type of functionality. At my previous company, I really didn't need to speak to anyone. I just knew what wanted to be built. I made some decisions that sometimes customers would be, when I'd be doing demos and things and prospects would be like, why are you doing it like this? And I'd explain. And it was a very sort of line in the sand, like, this is the way we do it. And we're only going to do it this way. So if you don't like it this way, you're better off going somewhere else. However, I think you should do it this way. It's actually going to be better for you. But yeah, at Campfire, because we're building so many different types of features as well, integrations with all different sort of, whether it be expense management or like something like Stripe. So I think it just really depends. So some functionality we speak to the customers before we even start, like even considering like the product requirements document or anything like that. And other times it's like, well, let's just go build it because we have a pretty good idea. For example, one thing I'm working on now is sort of Israeli tax authority compliance. And that and the output that the Israeli tax authority requires is very prescriptive. So there's no need to really speak to customers like, how would you like this thing called a PCN file? Because it's like literally written by the tax authority how it should
Makes sense.
exactly work. So it depends. It depends. So, but I'd say we're always speaking to customers at Campfire for sure. And any new sort of major sort of feature or key item on the roadmap, we'll get feedback to begin with, take that on board, maybe have a beta or something, get feedback on that. And it's very sort of iterative considering customer feedback. So I'd say pretty much at very least, I'd be hearing from a customer weekly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of sparks the next point of the conversation about the shipping of features. So we heard that you guys ship like 4 to 5 features a week. So it's a very, very quick, constant thing that's happening. So what's the system behind that pace? And like, how are you guys deciding what will make the cut, what won't make the cut? What infrastructure do you guys have in place to make that possible? Things like that. I'm hearing that, in some cases, it's very much like well, we need this for, legal purposes. So that those are a little more obvious. Like we just got to build that thing. But what about the rest? Like, how do you guys manage all of that?
Yeah, so it's definitely very fast. We move at a very fast velocity, and it's definitely the fastest I've ever seen. So we have three major teams like core accounting, revenue, and like sort of some integrations, and then our AI team. And then I guess in terms of like software development, it's just test driven development, all of those sort of standard, I guess, ways that most engineering teams, product teams, design teams work. I think the current world we're in with the likes of Claude Code, etc., Codex, engineers can move a lot quicker and iterate a lot quicker, and then therefore push more out. So it's just, I think we just move very quickly. Each team has ownership of sort of those three sections that I mentioned, and yeah, they just move very quickly. So in yeah, I think it's just sort of all the, the normal principles just accelerated. And I think the acceleration comes really just from the engineers not having to spend as much time as what they like. Normally, this would take 2 weeks. Now they can do it maybe in a day. It depends. It depends on what they're building and things. But I think the rapid rate is really an advancement of sort of the code, LLM code assistant, where you can just now write code so quickly.
How large is the Campfire team?
Yeah, so, well, in terms of total employees, I think we're at 130-ish now.
Okay.
Engineering, I believe it's above 30. So,
Okay.
and as I mentioned, so sort of in the each team's about 10 each that I mentioned, like the core account,
Cool.
sort of revenue, integrations, and then AI. So, and then it's John, our CEO, gets really involved as well. I guess he sort of PMs the AI sort of side of functionality. Then I think engineers really take a more active role, maybe compared to some other places where they're doing some research as well, sort of assisting me where I'll sort of say, I need you to go look at this, get an understanding of this, and then we'll have more of a fluid conversation where maybe it's not as a strict PRD with like the 10 tickets written, follow these step by step. They can take a little more ownership as well when building.
Is marketing able to keep up?
Yeah, that's a good
Genuine
question.
question.
Yeah. It can be tough because
Yeah.
sometimes maybe some smaller features have been shipped and people are like, I didn't even know we had that. I wouldn't even just say marketing, I would say the entire organization, whether it's sort of like support, our go to market team. Sometimes there will be, oh, I didn't realize we even had that integration. So I think that's something that we can always strive to get better at and communicate. I work with marketing very closely and keeping them up to date on all the features that we're releasing week by week.
Do you find that creates some friction or frustration? I've personally been part of teams where that communication was very flawed and that wasn't shared openly, and then support would get frustrated, go to market would get frustrated, and I'm curious, do you see that happening? And, like, it's great to hear there's a lot of, like, momentum on the product side, but it's almost like that momentum causing friction. I'm curious, does that happen?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a pleasant surprise when you're like, "Oh, I want this feature. Oh, it's already live. We've got that."
Yeah.
But of course, like, I think I'm not sure if friction's the right word, but I think, it's definitely something that, like, is one of my focuses going forward, especially now I've been here over 6 months, to
Yeah.
help build more awareness and make it a more fluid process where everyone is sort of kept aware and abreast of what's happening in terms from a product perspective, what's been shipped and why it's been shipped as well, and why we made that decision. So I wouldn't say there's any friction right now because everyone wants more. Like the thing with building an ERP, it's like such large surface area. Like it's like you'll never run out of roadmap. I think it's like infinite. So there's so much to continue to build, so I think people are mainly excited that we're shipping quickly. But of course, I guess if someone's just spoken with a customer and they're like, we're looking for this, and then we actually have it, or it'd be nice if
Yeah.
it does this and it actually already does it, of course, that's going to be a little frustrating for that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm also wondering too how so you have multiple teams all shipping multiple features, you know, at a time. How do you guys keep the communication um and this is I guess a little more on the technical side, like the back end side if you will. How do you guys keep the communication and the flow between all the different pods that are delivering features and like how when everyone's working on different things, how does that look in the day to day?
Yeah, so I guess a good thing about it is it's quite sort of segregated within the software. So, like
Gotcha.
someone that's working on a Stripe integration or chain updating a Stripe or making the Stripe integration a little more robust, or a customer has a specific use case for that Stripe integration, it's going to be quite segregated to Stripe and how that works in that section of the code base. And then someone that's working on, say, I mentioned the Israeli tax authority compliance, they're not going to talk to it. Like, they're so different where it's almost like they like those two engineers would never need to speak to each other ever. I think, and that sort of goes to the ERP, like a lot of things that we're building could be standalone products as well. So there's like revenue products out there, like a metronome or an orb, things like that. They're standalone products. There's consolidation tools in accounting. There's companies that literally just do that. So because there's so much surface area, and we're literally amalgamating a bunch of standalone products together, it does sort of in a way make that software development a little easier, because we don't need all of the engineers to be speaking to each other at all times, have context on that code base, because the code base can be quite segregated, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of best case scenario then in that case.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of spaghetti bowls happening.
Yes. Yeah. So if they are, they're segregated within
No,
with each one.
that's awesome.
Does
That's
accounting software have like a really big TAM? It seems like the way you're talking about it, there's like a huge market for this.
Yeah, well, I think so. Like, if you think about it, every company needs, like, of a certain size, needs accounting software, and that's the largest companies on the planet, right? So you're like your
Yeah.
Metas and your Alphabets and Amazon, they all need accounting software. And then your corner store, or your, hairdresser or hardware store, or local plumber, etc. So it's just like anyone with a business basically needs accounting software. We're a little more we're focused towards sort of mid-market, sort
Mhm.
of, that's our ICP. So we, not necessarily like small businesses, but nonetheless, the TAM, I would say, is like enormous. Like, it's sort of like,
Yeah.
it's as big as you want it to be.
That's so cool. I like the way you worded that. It's as big as you want it to be, because the way you're kind of talking about it, it's like you can continue building new products, continue building new features. It's really as big as you can dream, right?
Yep.
Based upon how you want to build your product. That's really cool. There's not a lot of products that you develop out there that are as big as you want it to be. You hit like a certain point where you're trying to really decide, what can I do with this thing to continue building on my market. So that's really, really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I would say it's sort of the other way here, where you need to be a little more deliberate, because the market is so big, and you don't want to sort of be a jack of all trades and master at none, where you can sort of do everything but not that well. So I say it's more like focusing on what to do really well, do it well, and then continue to expand, because it can be more of a curse than a blessing sometimes. Like, I think at the start, and like you have like SAP and Oracle, and they sort of are the ones that own like the large enterprises, that, those larger companies, such as, speaking of, will basically go to those companies. But I think there's a lot of companies that would like an alternative to
Yeah.
those two.
I do have a bit of a follow-up random question. Since we've been talking about this, it's sparked my interest. So you guys are developing a lot of features and you're adding a lot of really cool things. But what do you guys do in terms of deprecation? Like, are there things that, if we're continuing to add to the platform, but how does that look on the other side?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, and that's something that happens, where maybe the first version like did the job, but now we've got a bunch of users, a bunch of customers using it, and it needs to be a little more robust. And um, deprecation is a really interesting one to sort of tackle, and how to tackle, and how to deprecate, and when are you going to migrate the users on to the next piece of functionality. So it is something I would say is not a massive thing at the moment, but I think as we grow and expand and we get more users and more sort of in the realm of accounting, it's pretty complex, where like revenue accounting for a software company is very different to a construction company. So then how do we ensure that the revenue module can handle both? Or do we have like two separate revenue modules and things? So that concept of deprecation will come up. Do we deprecate the current to handle like this new sort of type of business and this new revenue sort of recognition? or do we just add to the current? Is it robust enough? Is the code base there? What do we think? So those are decisions and discussions always happening and happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's something that can kind of freak out PMs a little bit every once in a while is the topic of deprecation, especially if there are users on it, right? But
Yeah.
of course, it needs to be talked about. There if we just keep adding to things, eventually something's going to get piled on too much and things will break and stuff like that. I remember I had to make a decision about a deprecation like in the first 30 days of my new job. I was like, "Oh man, what a way to kick things off." But I ultimately did make the decision to deprecate a particular feature, but always looking at the pros and cons of it is important and what that looks like in the longer run. So they're good conversations to have. They can be scary, but they are good because in the long run, your product, will be better for it as you do deprecate the things that actually should be deprecated.
For sure. Um, I do want to ask a little bit about your head of finance role. I know we've been talking a lot about accounting, so sometimes role titles can be a little mixed. So you can kind of clean that up if that's more of the accounting side. But we want to kind of expand a little bit about PMs being more revenue focused. So in that head of finance role, how has that shaped your product work? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that like head of finance role was just accounting sort of finance role where I
Okay.
would just help with the finances and ensure there was enough like cash at bank to ensure we can make payroll, all of those things.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a really intricate, but it was, and definitely at my prior company, hiring people, making sure what's our burn, etc. How much money are we spending? Is this a worthy investment to hire, say, 3 more salespeople? Will that pay for the expected growth that should happen? So I'd be just curious, like, is your question more that a PM should get more of an understanding of how the business operates to help make critical decisions on like should we build this for like a for to get a certain market share, etc. Is that what you're getting, and understand the implications if you don't execute because then you can't sell the
More
product?
more of an understanding. A lot of PMs today are not as close to the business side and the
Yeah,
revenue side, and they're often focused so much on just product that they've shifted away from business problems, so they're not having those conversations to understand how to move the business forward, which often involves revenue.
yeah.
And so I think with your background, I'm wondering how that shaped your perspective of solving business problems from that mindset as a product person. And I wonder, I guess the other side of that is like if a product person isn't thinking the way you think, like how could they bridge that gap, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's like super useful. And again, I think it's just if you've founded a company in the past, you'll learn this pretty quickly because you got to keep the lights on. And if you raise money, my previous company was bootstrapped, so we had a huge incentive and drive to get customers, and then to build the features and functionality that would get customers and would get the most amount of customers. Like we wouldn't build something and we're just going to get this customer. It wouldn't be worthwhile for anyone else. So I think understanding sort of the business side and the revenue side is super helpful. It also helps you understand the priorities of the CEO and the priorities of the chief revenue officer and all the sales team as well, and why they may want this functionality over something else. And then you can also and you can just sort of empathize with them a lot better, and maybe it might result in some different decisions, maybe how quickly you're going to release it or how long you should take, because it's really important. We've had examples where we had some critical feature requests and we ended up pushing those live, but I ensured that they were at a high quality because I knew they were critical. Maybe the sales team or someone in the go-to-market team wants it a little earlier, and you should push back as well because it's a critical feature. Understanding those as well can give you context on the level of detail you need to make sure it's right. So I think it's super useful to sort of understand the direction of the company, where we want to go, what markets we want to get into, because especially with like what we're building at Campfire, it's like then crucial because that's also going to shape the roadmap and like
Yeah.
if we're expanding into international markets, well, okay, what's the product impact of that? And that's sort of, as I've already mentioned, the Israeli sort of tax authority compliance and those reports. So, and then if we're expanding into the UK, what does the UK require there? Okay, we probably need to get started on that right now if we plan to, expand or hire our first salesperson in 2 months. So I think, yeah, it's very important to sort of understand those decisions, what's going to drive revenue, because then you don't execute there. I think some people in the organization might be a little, why'd you prioritize this when you knew this was happening with the business and was crucial
Yeah.
to our success?
How far out is Campfire's roadmap?
I like to call it the near-term roadmap. So we have, I would say, the next 6 months pretty well sort of set in stone. And then after that, it's more of a conversation because it
Yeah.
can change depending on new customers, different where we're really seeing the demand and things. So I like to sort of have 6 months of where we want to go, and then yeah, leave sort of the rest of the year a little more fluid.
I love how much that's changed since AI has become more prevalent in teams and how fast people are shipping because, teams a year and a half ago would be expecting, especially like VC firms would be expecting 18 months or 2 years. They would be expecting these long roadmaps. And now I'm seeing teams even say like they don't want to see a roadmap period because they want to see teams shipping so quickly. It's good to hear like from a YC team that ships 4 to 5 features a week that they're 6 months. Like that's as much as we're willing to do right now because that shows that even with that high velocity, like we're having conversations at 6 months. We're not doing 12 months or 18 months. You know what I mean? Um, because the times have changed. We need to accept that times have changed when it comes to road mapping. Um, just my thoughts. I don't know. I've just seen so many different perspectives on that. So it's good to hear from like an active team that times have changed.
Yeah, and I would say we have general sort of functionality that we want to get to as well. And that would be, your 12 to 18 months, but where that's going to come and how that's going to come and who's going to work on it and all of those things, we definitely haven't got as far as that. It's more like the big ticket items are there.
Sure.
But when like we haven't broken it down to the granularity or anything like that.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. Leaves room to learn.
Yeah, of course. And there's room to move and stuff like that. There's more flexibility. Like AI is just moving so quickly. Do you feel like AI has shaped your your domain quite a bit since you've been in it for so long?
Yeah, I think it's interesting and sort of harping back to when I was working at technical accounting at KPMG, and I was working with like a bunch of like KPMG partners, and they'd been, 25, 30 years of experience, and they were incredibly intelligent and just knew so much. And I was like sort of blown away how much they knew. And still, if I were to prompt Claude, they're not going to get close to how much they know and how well rounded they are, and how they will be like, well, this is only sort of surface level and it's missing this, this, and this, or for it. So I think it's interesting. I think it can be really helpful for basics. So an engineer can sort of be like, why are we, not to get too into the weeds, but why is this a debit and why this is credit? That's sort of like all these accounting sort of lingo and things. So it can be helpful for basic stuff, but then they can sort of end up going to the complete wrong place. The LLM suggests something, and then it's like, you still, I think, having the knowledge and the domain expertise, when you can sort of rely on it and sort of use it as a as a partner, and when to just be like, no, you're completely wrong, and this is wrong, and I don't know how you came up with that, but you're not you're hallucinating. So I think it's overall it's good, and I think it does accelerate the process, but it's sort of, you got to be careful with it as well, because it can result in decisions being made that probably are incorrect as well, just through not maybe digging deep enough, or not including in your prompt some other scenarios that you should have, and then the answer would be different. But overall, I think it's a really useful tool, though.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that stood out to me as you were speaking. It sounds like accounting, finance, tech, all that fun stuff. Very, very in depth. Like it seems like there's a lot of layers and levels to it. So much so that, like you said, like the LLMs don't even touch the folks that have been in this field or know the way around this world really well. So this is a bit of a side question, but I am curious if there are folks that haven't worked in finance tech before or don't have a financial background like you do, and let's say they want to work in a field like this, or in a company like Campfire or what have you, what would be your advice for those folks that maybe want to pivot into finance tech that don't have any prior experience? Like, can it be done? Or, like what tips would you give them?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So, like, for example, the accountants and the finance people, we have these accreditations. So we sort of make people go do these things to become part of the club. And you really can't avoid these accreditations if you want to get certain jobs at certain places. So we've, accountants and finance people of the world have decided to do that. So if you really were super interested, you would go sort of do your CPA, what you would do in the States. So you'd study accounting at university, then do your CPA, and then you would have an accreditation, which sort of the rest of the country would acknowledge, okay, you must know something about accounting. And then you have a similar thing in the finance world called your CFA. And that's like a really grueling sort of bunch of exams that you can sit, which again, once you pass those exams, people would accept that you do understand finance and the concepts of finance because you've gone through this vetting process. So you could go that route. It's a bit of a long route. Or what you could do is just go build your own accounting or finance tool and sort of build that credibility that way. Or go try and work for someone, but that might be difficult because they're probably going to have a bias towards those with those accreditations. So then it would just be off you go build something that people use, that big companies use, and you sort of prove yourself that way. And if you can do that, I think that will gain a lot of respect within sort of the industry to be able to do that.
That makes sense. I have a friend who's a product manager, and he's like really interested in fintech. He really likes like financial technology software, and he just got his like CPA, I think,
Yep.
just to like know more about it. And I think it's really interesting how certifications and things like that can just teach us more about certain domains, even if we don't plan to continuously work in that domain. It can still teach us more as product managers and product people if we want to have more knowledge of that background. I'd be curious if somebody wanted to know more about accounting, if something like that could be relevant if they wanted to work in that domain, or if that would be weird.
Like if you're interested in it, like you go for it. But I think it's just like a little bit like these professions, like accountants. It's a bit like if I wanted to practice medicine tomorrow, like they're not going to let me. You need to. I just can't decide I'm a doctor.
Oh,
And it's sort of like engineering, like these type of lawyers need to go do the bar exam, etc. Sort of accounting's one of those sort of professions where the industry is just like, you need to do a couple of things before we're going to let you start, deciding and making accounting judgments and all of that stuff.
that's so true.
Yep. No DIY doctors and accountants. It's just
Look,
do a couple
you
things first.
you can be though, like if you were really into it and you had this, I'm not sure if there's a lot of super passionate people about accounting, but for whatever reason you just one day woke up, you could learn. There's so much information on the internet, on
Yeah.
YouTube, etc. There's free courses you can do on accounting. Like you could you could do it. Like there's nothing stopping you from doing it.
That was actually a follow-up question I had in all seriousness is like, are there other, aside from getting like a CPA or the CFA that you mentioned, like, are there other, I don't know if it's like certifications elsewhere or like courses, or is there other ways that folks could look into doing something like that? And like, what would your recommended path be? Let's pretend like for whatever reason they can't do path one. What would path two look like for those folks?
Yeah, so I think it would really depend what they're trying to achieve. So if they're just trying to look, I would just like a better. I'm sort of, as you mentioned, Megan. you have a friend that's really interested in fintech and they did their CPA. So that's pretty extreme to go that far and do
Yeah.
that. But maybe they're just, yeah, I would like to work at an ERP as a PM, and I have a lot of PM background, but I want to sort of get a little more familiarized with the sort of some of the aspects of the product before I even consider sort of making that leap. I think it would just be online courses. There's a bunch of them. YouTube. If you really wanted to, you could do a course at a college, university, or so, like something like that to get that. Or you could just really apply yourself, learn it, and then come to sort of the interview rounds. Like you just display to that organization that, hey, I put a lot of work in here and I know now the basics of accounting or finance, whatever that role you're trying to move into. I've sort of learnt how it works. I've done these courses. I couldn't like name courses sort of like off the top of my head because I went down my route, and my route was sort of the really formal, um, and it's sort of like the pipeline. If you want to work for a large company as like a CFO or something like that, this is the route you go. Like you go to university, then you go to one of the big four firms, and then you get qualified at the big four firms. You get exposed to the biggest companies, and that's sort of the route I went through. But that's not like you can go any route you want at the end of the day.
I I have a question about like the co-founder to PM jump. So I feel like we've covered a lot of the positives that came from that jump for you. And maybe we haven't covered all of them. So if you have any additional positives you want to cover, definitely feel free to share. But I want to know about the negatives or the trade offs that came from that jump. And if you have any of those to share.
Yeah. So I think like the positives is like just like as I mentioned, like at the end of the day, you get to call the shots, like which is nice. And if you're in a small team, there's it's a lot easier to communicate some of those things as we mentioned, like product velocity. Does everyone know? Like everyone knows because it's a really small team, and you're really sort of moving together. So like everyone knows the product back to front, like super well. Um, I'd say going from like a co-founder position to then to Campfire, like it wasn't too bad. I spent a lot of time working at really large accounting firms, which very hierarchical, very structured. Um, this is what you're working on, this is your role, and sort of this is the way we do it. And maybe there's some understanding to some pushback and considering other ways. So I sort of came from that environment at the start of my career, so I know that pretty well. So I'd say one of the biggest ones is you're just in a new environment, and at the end of the day, which can also be a good thing, the buck doesn't stop with you anymore. Like
Yeah.
if you're not getting enough sales, etc., it's not on me anymore,
Yeah.
which is nice. Like I don't have to worry about go to market. I don't have to worry sort of about nearly as much on HR and like hiring's still a thing, but like it's not. I need to hit the hiring goals, so you can be a little more specialized at your role at the company, which can be really nice because it's not everything you have to worry about. So I think that's another positive. And like to be honest, like I don't really see too many negatives except that, you know, the trajectory and sort of all of those things will be that like the really big decisions will be done by the board and the CEO. And like my role at Campfire, I'm very happy with sort of at product and really focusing on product and rolling my sleeves up there. And maybe if there's something, you come from a co-founder and you're now at that company that you necessarily don't agree with, it might be harder, but that's not the case for me at Campfire.
Yeah. I imagine it was somewhat familiar too, being in the same domain. So it was like semi familiar. I can't imagine the jump of being like in the same domain your entire career and then just like shifting to like, I don't know, travel or
Yeah.
some random domain that you've never worked in.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that's sort of been always a common thread for me, made it a lot easier. To be honest, one of the biggest like changes was we were remote at my prior company, and now we're in person here. And I used to be again used to like at KPMG, etc. Was always in person. Remote didn't exist when I worked there. So, but that was a bit of a shock because I hadn't worked in person for like 5 years and 6 years, and I was like, oh, now we're in person again.
Yeah.
This is a bit different.
Is it nice? Like, do you like working in person or do you miss that remote a little bit? Are you guys hybrid or fully on site?
We're fully on site, so
Okay.
I think, like, there's positives and negatives to everything.
Yeah.
I think being fully on site and in person, it makes those sort of serendipitous conversations, etc.,
Yeah.
about our product really easy. And like, I can just walk over to someone instead of sending a Slack message and thinking about it and how they're going to interpret this. I can just pop over to them. Hey, can we do it like this? This is the reason why. We'll write it down together, agree upon it, and then just move on. So I think for that, it's like really, really good, and how fast we're moving. Like, I spend a lot of my day just speaking with people, to be honest,
Yeah.
and that would be super draining. I feel like at home, just on
Yeah.
Zoom or whatever, huddles with Slack all day. So I really appreciate sort of the in office, just because I don't want to be dialing in and doing that. I can sit down with someone and we can whiteboard together, which is a lot easier in person. So I think there's a lot of benefits to being in person. Every now and then we can take a remote day, etc., as well, and sort of get some of those benefits where you
Yeah.
don't have to commute to work and things like that.
That's good. That's cool. I've been remote for a really long time, and I think more and more the longer I'm remote, I definitely miss on-site work or at least hybrid work. Because one of my remote companies, we did a lot of on-site time as like a team, and that was some of the best times that I can remember. So it's fun talking to people who have been remote and then gone back to on-site. And so far, no one that I've talked to, like, regrets it. I think
Mm.
people really enjoy the energy that they spend on site with people. Obviously, there's perks to being remote, like, you don't have to commute and all that kinda stuff, but the energy of being in person is a lot of fun, especially for product teams, I feel like, because you can move so much faster. So it's fun to hear that you don't regret it or don't hate it or anything. I don't know if you'd say that live on a podcast if you did, but I imagine that there'd be at least hints that you don't necessarily like it if you didn't like it.
Yeah. And I'd also just like, the last thing is you get to know people a lot better personally, a lot
Yeah,
quicker. I think that's fun too, just to know everyone, know their backgrounds, where they're from, what they're into, what their interests are in life, and sort of things outside of work. I think that
yeah,
happens a lot quicker than what would happen sort of remote, where
totally
you're
agree.
not just going to randomly, Zoom someone just to see what they're doing for the weekend. That would probably be a bit strange. So you have that as well.
Totally. Well, Brendan, we always ask our guests if there's anything that we haven't covered that you want to cover.
No, I think, just to echo your comments, I think we've covered everything that we planned to discuss. So, no, nothing more from me.
Cool. And we always ask a spicy question at the end. So, as a former founder and now as a PM at Campfire, how often do you watch a decision get made and have to stop yourself from saying it's the wrong decision?
Um, I think well, again, given I do have quite a lot of say in product and how the product's built, rarely, given how close we work together. Campfire does this well, where you can definitely voice your opinion. And when it comes down to how the product should be built, what it should look like, all of those things, um, no, I feel like I get to have a lot of say in that. So from a product perspective, that rarely has happened that I can think of. It's more sort of like, how are we going to do it? I'd like to defer to someone and be like, hey, can you just work it out? So yeah, I'd say it's more of the opposite, how I found it so far.
That's fair.
One question though, actually, it literally just popped into my mind. So, because you got into this role using your domain expertise, I'm wondering if there is any advice you have for folks that are an expert in a domain, and how like did you position yourself to be noticed and like land the job, and what advice would you give those folks that are trying to do the same thing, break into product using domain expertise or their background?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So in my case, I just created the opportunity for myself and started my own company. And to be honest, like, I think if I was interviewing at Campfire without that background, maybe it wouldn't have been nearly as compelling to be hired at Campfire. Because I think when you go out and prove you can do it and prove that customers like and random companies on the other side of the world. Like, we had customers in Saudi Arabia, South Africa, the US. Like, if you can prove that you can build something and you can build a product and people are willing to pay for you, I think that pay for it, it goes a really, really long way. maybe if you're not willing to take such a big leap of faith, but you like want to bring your domain expertise. Let's say you're an architect. I don't know. You want to go build architecture software or something. I think it would be start learning about product, show an interest in software, start going to meetups, start to get to know engineers as well. And like maybe you can do a little side project with an engineer now with Claude Code and, Codex, etc. You could try to build a pretty good prototype, what you're even thinking about. And then I think it would just be build that network and start applying for sort of those companies that you want to bring your domain expertise, those software companies, etc., and see what the feedback is, see what they're looking for them to take sort of a bet on you in product. From an accounting perspective, we're always looking to grow the team at Campfire and looking for PMs. And for me, I put a very, very, and maybe because I'm biased, but a strong emphasis on accounting background for sure. And I would potentially take someone with zero product background and a really, really strong accounting background over
Wow.
them. Yeah, because I like some of the intricacies that are required in certain areas of accounting. I would just like they have such a strong influence on the product anyway, where it's like I'd say it's harder to learn those intricacies rather than just learn sort of how to build product and how to work with engineers and sort of the process of building software. So yeah, but maybe I'm more of an extremist.
No, kudos to you. I feel like it's very hard to get like associate PM roles, and kudos to you being open to that because I think more people need to be open to that. And so, like, cheers to you. I love that. I think that Santi and I like want to see more of that. So we love that.
100%. That's how I started. I started in an associate product manager role. It was the best thing for my career, personally, like to flourish into like a full-fledged PM.
Yep,
Absolutely, that role is incredible. There's a lot of learning that happens in that role, and I think more companies should be doing it and not posting them and saying 3 years product experience. That's not an APM role, people. Come on. Yeah, so
People just need a chance. So I love that. RIP your inbox after this because I'm afraid that you might get some people hitting you up, Brendan, but we
that's
love to
fine.
hear it. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I think this has been a lot of fun and I love the thread of your career and this has been a lot of fun to share about that. Do you have a newsletter or anything like that that we can share like in the show notes about like, what you guys are doing at Campfire or anything personally that you share?
Yeah, so at Campfire we have product like weekly product. We have a mailing list, so we have product updates and things like that. So if you're just curious on what we're shipping and the velocity and all of that, you can sign up for that. I'd also
Cool.
recommend following the Campfire LinkedIn page, and you'll get a lot of products there. Personally, I just have my own LinkedIn, and if you want to track me down, feel free.
Cool. Well, we'll link it in the show note page. And we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
No problems. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, for another episode of the Product Pivot. We had an awesome chat today, and stay tuned for the next one.